Techlandia is recorded at the Central Office on the East Side in Portland. Central Office is a one stop for all your office or meeting needs. Check them out at centraloffice.com.
Welcome to the latest episode of Techlandia, Tao's regular podcast series. I'm Skip Newberry, President and CEO of Tao. And with us, we're pleased to have as our guest, Eric Hulbert, who is with Opus Interactive. Eric, glad you could join us on today's episode.
Glad to be here, Skip.
Awesome. So most people don't probably know this, but you were probably one of the first people I met professionally when I first moved to Portland back in, I think it was like the end of 2005 or so, back when I was still in the private sector, and our paths crossed on some work together, which is exciting. So I'm glad to catch up with you as always, and excited to get your take on some of the trends you're seeing in the world of data centers. Most people also probably don't realize necessarily that, Opus Creative and Opus Interactive were once part of the same entity, if you will. And before you went off and created two separate companies, one focused on data centers and hosting. And so it would be interesting to, if you could take a few minutes, share a little bit about your own journey, how take us up to present day and how you got here.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'm glad that I was one of the first people you ran into back in the day, and it has been a very long time. My journey with Opus specifically started all the way back in 1999 when it was just Opus Creative, and we were building the web applications and custom reservation systems and all that kind of fun e-commerce stuff as Opus Creative, and hence there was a need to host said solutions, which is where Opus Interactive was born as a division of that creative company, which I was running both the development team of Opus Creative, which is really where we first ran into each other on the development side of things in the agency world. And then I was also running the hosting division, Opus Interactive, which eventually we did split off into its own company, which is what we are today. But our journey has, been going on for quite some time. Before Opus, I worked at a company that did sort of infrared imaging type stuff, which was FLIR Systems. That was a very fun, project, if you will, in the IT world, more on the enterprise side of things and the need for hosting that infrastructure. And then also some interactions with internet service providers way back in the day doing dial-up and DSL. If those remember the sounds of a modem connecting to the internet, was involved in that world as well.
Awesome.
Definitely a long journey to get to where we are today.
And as you think about, kind of where you are today, I was wondering if you could share a little bit about the types of companies that you're working with as clients and customers.
Yeah, today we typically focus on tailored solutions for medium to large enterprise type companies, specifically when they're looking for solutions that are either high compliance, high security, or high performance applications that are very tailored to their use case. Obviously anyone can go to the hyperscalers, aka Amazon and Azure and Google, and fiddle around with drop downs and pick their different servers, more of the cookie cutter instance sizes. We're more focused on very specific application solutions that also may have a component of a hyperscaler where we're connecting everything together, being sort of the middle point for them for those kinds of companies. So that's a lot of what we're doing. And we're seeing a lot of sort of high performance compute AI clusters to run, all sorts of different processing or pipelines of whatever a company might be doing. And we'll typically be the solution that's in the middle. And then they'll do their bursting of extra GPU workloads up in Google or in, Amazon. And we stitch all that together for them, being sort of the glue that holds it together. Because these days it's more of a any cloud, hybrid cloud kind of solution as opposed to, one cloud fits all.
Yep. Yep. And in terms of, just demand right now, what are you seeing in terms of trends, say like starting pre-pandemic to today? What are you seeing in terms of what customers are really, focused on, and where the greatest amount of sort of hosting need lies currently?
Yeah, the current demand is I would say significantly higher than it was even in the right before COVID started and then into 2020. It was a huge push on the public cloud side, especially around tools like Zoom and Teams and things like that. Like everybody pushed very quickly into public cloud because it was the fastest, easiest way to throw a credit card and get up and running with whatever infrastructure they needed to now move to the cloud, especially with all the move to your remote workers, right? Around the, everyone being stuck at home back in the COVID days. But then as that sort of moved on, more and more companies have started to add some form of AI, whether it's just the machine learning side of things, while they're training their models, might not have figured out exactly what the use case is going to be within their own organization. But that has driven significant growth for all of those things for Amazon and Microsoft, aka Azure and Google, and then even GPU as a service companies like CoreWeave have been gobbling up data centers as fast or faster really than they can be built. I mean, even here in Hillsboro in Oregon, which has now become one of the largest data center markets in the United States, whereas back even just 10 years ago, that was not the case. So what's happening is these very large buildings are getting stood up. If you drive out on Cornelius Pass and Evergreen in that area, you just see massive buildings continuing to spring up, and they're almost going up as fast as you can think about it. And they're usually pre-leased before they're even done. You got Meta out here with a huge footprint with QTS. You got X, aka Twitter, on the other side of Highway 26, and it's just building after building, continuing to get filled up with lots of these huge GPU clusters and AI workloads. So tons of that going on. And that's not just here in Oregon, it's all over the place, even over in Virginia and Texas. It's really no shortage of that. And then it's leaving a lot less availability for the enterprise customers when they need data center space for, maybe 10 cabinets or even just a single cabinet. Because a lot of these massive data center buildings, the entire huge building, which could be 3, 4, 500,000 square feet, even up to a million square feet, end up being for one hyperscaler or one super large enterprise customer.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing just across all of our member companies just a massive amount of uptake when it comes to AI driven sort of needs as more deployments are happening, more experimentation, moving beyond pilots to more wide scale deployments. And I think the thing that obviously concerns some folks is the limiting factor of existing grid infrastructure, transmission bottlenecks, the mix of different energy sources. What are some ways that you all are approaching some of those challenges as you're looking at as your needs change and as growth looms on the horizon potentially? Like what's your thinking in terms of how to tackle some of those factors?
Yeah, and that is definitely a concern, Skip, in that the grid is having a hard time keeping up. And there's even been some legislature lately that passed in Oregon specifically to pass on some of those extra costs in a higher electricity rate to the large data center providers, the
Correct.
8 megawatt plus, so as to help bring back down a little bit on the residential users' power rate. We'll see how that all plays out. But ultimately at Opus, we've always been about, sustainable infrastructure with sustainability being at our core, both, responsibility to the planet and the people, but also the use of resources all the way down to we're doing things like super efficient, energy efficient infrastructure, three-phase power supplies that provide a more balanced, efficient electrical usage on said servers, and then even down to the facilities, the data centers themselves, and their power utilization effectiveness rating, also known as PUE. The lower that is, the more efficient the facility. So, as an example, our Hillsboro, Oregon facility is a LEED Platinum rated facility, which is super sustainable. 100% power being sourced from sustainable, power sources. It's still served obviously locally by Portland General Electric, but we actually buy power direct from hydro and solar and wind, things like that on the open market, which provides the ability to get better, lower carbon, so more carbon neutral. And then ourselves and our cloud infrastructure, we actually purchase carbon offset credits so that we can provide a cloud, carbon positive cloud offering as opposed to, just doing our best. But that's a lot of what Opus is doing. And, the industry as a whole are coming up with new ways to provide power generation. You see a lot of sort of trends going back into the nuclear sort of side of things and smaller, nuclear type reactor type setups for data centers specifically.
Mhm.
Harder to do when you've got 250 megawatt campuses, but certainly across the US, there are deployments and there are plenty of companies that are certainly seeing their stock grow as a result of that with the new nuclear possibilities.
So since we're in the realm of like future state, right? We've been talking a little bit about some of where things are headed in terms of the energy infrastructure supporting data centers. Where do you see the technology and data centers themselves heading? And what's kind of top of mind for you in that mix? Like, do you see more distributed types of compute or still increasingly more and more and greater concentrations like we're seeing with some of these hyperscalers and huge data centers all in one facility?
Yeah. Back in the day, it was more basically just the tier one markets that had the big data centers. And, network was sort of the limiting factor between all of them. But with this growth in AI and just technology in general, and all the use cases that we all continue as humans to come up with, it's being less of the being in a tier one market. And you're starting to see a lot of urban and rural markets come up with data centers because the cost of connecting them together is significantly lower and it makes more sense. And even as that continues to grow, edge is the big word in the data center world in the last couple of years because even down to things like self-driving cars, aka Tesla, Rivians, et cetera. Technically, the CPU and GPUs and computers within those things are their own edge data center, mini data center deployment with the processing power that they have. But there's still always going to be at the core of the large data center processing centers that are the, couple hundred megawatt, millions of square feet of data center to do the main storage and processing. But the initial data collection is getting more and more pushed to the edge, all the way down to the device as technology gets continued and increased in that aspect. And then within the data center, it's less about physical space these days, which obviously they still take up a lot of the space, but it's more
Mhm.
about the power that they're using and then the cooling that is required. They've gotten to the level where there's data center technology that has been developed that can do 2 megawatts of power in a single data center rack, which for those that know what that is, that's a 2 foot by 4 foot footprint that can literally take 2 megawatts of power and provide the cooling for it, which is just absolutely insane to be to those densities.
Wow. Wow. And as we think about too, like kind of where things are going and sort of this future where people are demanding more and more of their compute infrastructure, what role do you see Oregon and the broader Pacific Northwest playing? Like, why did you decide, other than the fact you were based here, or maybe that was it, to do Opus Interactive in Hillsboro and then continue to maintain it here? Do you see a future where the Northwest could be a leader in this compute infrastructure layer?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would argue that Oregon, specifically Hillsborough and Washington County, is one of the leaders data center space and is now would be considered a tier one market for data center. The absorption of continued data center power use and infrastructure is one of the largest, maybe second to say Virginia on the East Coast. But it's a lot of, around things like in Oregon, there's no sales tax. That certainly helps when you're putting billions of dollars of equipment. And then there are, again, very sustainable power, options here in the Pacific Northwest. And even with the potential slightly higher rate with this new legislature that has passed, it's still one of the lowest power cost markets in the US and clean energy, sources. And PG as an actual power provider has one of the best delivery electrical delivery grids, specifically because of the manufacturing of companies like Intel and all the ones that feed into them. It
Hmm.
was built very well and very redundant from the beginning, which certainly helps for data centers. Then the other big reason beyond Opus being headquartered in Oregon, right, is the fact that the majority of all of the new network infrastructure and submarine cables actually land in Oregon, which a lot of people may not know. Back in the day, it used to be LA and up in Washington, Seattle specifically, but now all the newer cables are coming in, and landing in Oregon, and that's due to Oregon's coast having a much better path, if you will. It's not super rocky, it's sandy, it's got a very good relationship with the fishing industry, so they're not going to be running their boats up across the fiber cables. So Oregon has been very forward around technology and really enabling all of us to continue to grow, which is why there's so many additional data centers that continue to grow and land in Oregon as opposed to some of the other markets. But
Yeah.
as a whole, right, they're all growing at absolutely insane rates to where, I would even argue at what point might there be a little bit of a bubble in the AI space, not like the dot com bubble per se, where I think it'll just shift from a lot of the, we don't really know what we're doing, but we're training a bunch of models and we're, experimenting with a bunch of GPU clusters to then shifting into actual real world use cases that companies would then pivot those, large clusters to.
Yep. Yep. And the Northwest, I would imagine also a lot of people don't realize, in addition to some of the cabling that comes across to the Oregon coast, you also have this kind of internet exchange in the Pittock block, and the significance of that is kind of a hub, if you will, of connectivity that supports metros and compute activities all up and down the West Coast. And so the fact that that's all here, in addition to all the points you made around the manufacturing infrastructure and the energy grid that was built up around that, also supports data centers. Shifting a little bit, what would you say are some of the both opportunities and challenges when it comes to the talent mix that's here? Now, some folks would say that data centers don't necessarily require a ton of workers, ton of employees. What would you say to that, and where are there growth opportunities for folks who might want to pursue a career in the data center world?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, right. The argument that we've seen written a lot about, oh, there's not a lot of jobs in the data center space, compared to, an office worker type solution or retail, or even they say manufacturing, where you might have thousands of people to tens of thousands of people in a campus. Sure, data centers are going to be in the hundreds, but at the same time, they're very highly skilled, people. And like you mentioned, right, not a ton of them need to be on a site, but there are still a lot of people that back the cloud infrastructure, the engineers and the system administrators and the architects, and then of course all the admin staff and sales, and they can pretty much work anywhere. But in terms of actual data center people and the growth that it's very hard to find is around actual data center techs that need to be in the data center, that are cabling and racking and stacking the servers and the firewalls and the storage. And then, of course, even on the data center operator side, the actual operations people that are, typically tending to the generators and the mechanical plants and the UPSs. That is an area of growth opportunity for people to learn or reskill into. And a lot of the data center operators are working to continue that education. We also participate in a lot of STEM related, events and activities to try to drive people to actually learn this skill and trade at any one of those layers, because it's only going to be more and more of that. Even with AI and all the cool things that can be done and automated, well, there's still the people that need to keep up those systems and program them and help with them. And then in the facility itself, still got to cable all that. It's going to be a while before robots can get to that level of tiny little fiber cables and connecting to switches and all of that, right? So humans still need to be evolved, and we definitely see a huge growth point for those kinds of people, since like I mentioned, the data centers are springing up faster than you can even blink, and they all still need people. Yeah, not tens of thousands in a location, but still hundreds that are going to be managing that infrastructure on site.
Hmm. Yep. And what would you say are some of the the strengths, the things that set Opus Interactive apart from some of your competitors? So, what would be your pitch to prospective customers?
Yeah, I mean, our pitch around Opus is it's really around our white glove tailored solutions. So, very high touch, customized solutions that we're providing for customers. We have a very high NPS score, sitting at a 9.4, been around for almost 30 years. We are the experts in our space around private cloud and infrastructure as a service, but then also the hybrid solutions where it's not, one solution fits all. That level of white glove attention and service is definitely one of the biggest things that sets us apart. And then, of course, around things like our climate positive cloud and just our tenure in the industry with engineers and architects, we are really good at what we do. We have a lot of customers that are happy to provide references and case studies, which goes a long way in our space.
Excellent. And as we think about like where things are headed, like what are you most excited about for the company looking at the horizon?
Well, I'm most excited about the solutions that we've been currently offering for customers where, they went all in on a hyperscale, let's say, and the pricing calculators and the salespeople promised them that it's going to be, this X number a month. They get all migrated up there. And then by the time they're actually using their solution, it's, 150 times or 200 times the cost that they expected. Or in the really large deployments, maybe it's, 2x or 3x, but very high cost compared to what they thought it was going to be.
Hmm.
And it's usually around big HPC or database clusters with some AI components. Those have been very exciting as of late to architect and provide solutions for them that we can then install in one of our data centers, whether that's here in Oregon or in Texas or Virginia, the main three regions of the US. A lot of that has been coming up in the last couple of quarters. That is certainly very exciting. And then, yeah, just the solutions that people are, looking to solve are getting more and more technical. And, at least for me personally, I love the trying to solve something for a customer that's very unique and requires a tailored solution, which is exactly what we do. That's
Hmm.
been very fun and very prevalent in the last year and a half, let's say.
Nice. That's awesome. And as we look at like what exactly the future holds, and this is a fast moving space, like what do you read or listen to just stay up on trends?
Well, I tend to, as of late, I've been downloading a lot of AI related books on Audible with my a subscription there. And whenever I'm traveling, I'll be listening to one of those or some podcasts. I would say one to check out that I'm only partway through, but so far I like it is Empire of AI
Hmm.
by Karen Howe. That one's pretty cool. And then also the Thinking Machine, which is around NVIDIA and that
Yeah.
the whole process. I also haven't finished that one because I tend to switch between them as I'm, flying to different places or driving to different places. But both of them are pretty good. And then even on the more fiction side of things, there's a series called The Killing Machine that's pretty entertaining. That certainly continues me down that rabbit hole of AI and almost hopefully not where the world is going to be taken over by AI, but certainly some of them go that direction. And it's quite entertaining.
Yes, yes, the science fiction meets reality nexus of AI moving into the physical world, and what does that mean? Are we getting closer to kind of the Terminator type of
Exactly.
future? Yes,
Yeah.
and yeah, and so as we start to near the end of our time, I wanted to cede the floor to you and see if there's any final words of wisdom you want to leave our listeners with.
Yeah, I mean, really, the only thing that I would leave at the end is sort of a principle that I've always followed, and I kind of got from my grandfather, and It's pretty much that we live by is if you're going to do something, do it right the first time. So
Yep.
that's typically the sort of saying that we continue to, live by is make sure that we're doing everything in the right way for the right reason, not just because it's, lucrative for, the shareholders. It's more about what the customer needs. And in some cases, we might not be that, and we're happy to tell a customer that and then direct them where they need to go. So again, do the right thing for the right reason and do it right the first time.
Love it. Love it. That's a great way to wrap. Words of wisdom right there. So thanks for taking some time, Eric, to spend with us. And thanks as well for illuminating the fast moving world of data centers for us too. We really appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks for your time, Skip. Great catching up as usual.
That's a wrap on this episode of Techlandia, the podcast, where innovation meets insight. If you enjoyed today's conversation, don't forget to follow us, leave a review, and share it with your fellow tech explorers. You can follow us at techoregon.org for updates and more tech-fueled content. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and keep building the future.